All right. Well, today, talking with Director of Games User Research, Scott Klein. Playtesting just got a whole lot more efficient. And if you're a studio that's approaching alpha or beta and you're looking to maximize the impact of your playtest, you're going to want to listen to this. And so, Scott, thanks for joining me. Would love to hear a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me today. I'm excited to talk about this as usual. I've been in user research my whole career. I started this 20 plus years ago doing any kind of UX research when it was still usability. I evolved into games user research about a decade into my career. I started at Big Fish Games there as a web usability researcher. We were a web portal, and then I evolved into games user research from there when the founder wanted to ask me if I could just take the user experience, research experience that I had and put it towards games. The producers were making games or were doing the research at the time, and I was happy to jump in and do that and say, let's figure out what that looks like. So then, um, spent almost a decade at Big Fish Games and building their whole insights program. We went from just a pure usability shop to games user research to insights as a whole. And so that was marketing research as well. And then after a time there, I moved over to Meta and was driving some of the research for their VR ecosystem there with VR developers, their storefront, and their games user research there. So been in games for, I don't know, 13, 14 years, doing research of all sorts across the board there.
Before we hopped on, we were talking a bit about the evolution of games user research, and this is a stereotype, but for the longest time, they weren't in the spotlight, and I've certainly heard a few stories about maybe less than desirable working conditions for your underpaid, overworked researchers. But in 2024, that tide seems to be shifting, and more studios are coming to Solsten, talking with your team, talking to other player research firms, and saying, "Hey, I'm trying to build a really incredible game. Help me understand what's working well and where do I need to pivot. Like I don't have unlimited bandwidth, time, and now capital to deploy on features and content ideas that aren't going to resonate in the end with my target audience." And so, Scott, in your opinion, what has changed most about the player research function in the past decade?
Yeah, the best way I can say is the seat at the table has changed, right? Where we've been pulled into the table versus sitting on the sidelines, I think. And so I think as the market has matured and grown, the saturation has happened, right? And so there's a key for differentiation that wasn't there before. And I think in order to do that, they needed to understand these players more than they ever have before. When I first started in gaming, there was a lot, the art was still there. There wasn't the saturation. So you could kind of create a very creative, cool game and players would gravitate to it because there wasn't much else out there. Now there's 100 or 1,000 that are just like that out there. So it's easy for them to hop around. So it's much more important for you to come and understand why that audience is in there, who that audience is, and build specifically for them in a way that resonates really strongly with them so that they want to stay in that game. They don't want to jump out. They're so connected into that game, into the community, into the game in itself, and they're committed. And so research plays a huge role in that. You've got data science who's looking at all that behavioral data, and then you've got the researchers who are looking at sentiment and other bits and pieces about who that user is. And at Solstice in particular, it's like the psychological side of it, who they are at a personality level that really drives that. So I think research now has a much more important role. Well, I mean, not necessarily more important, but it's deemed more important, I guess, if you would, by the powers that be, to have that data and to really be up there driving decision making than we've ever had before. So it's fantastic to have been in research for all this time and now get to really say, like, yeah, I've been saying this for a long, long time, but now everybody really wants it. And so that drive is fun to have. And now we're in high demand more than we ever have been.
So as studios become more obsessed with player understanding and consumer insights, something that I know everybody at Solston is really excited about is the launch of the typing tool. And obviously the efforts that go into organizing, launching, delivering insights from a playtest is a ton of work, especially if your team doesn't have a dedicated research team or experience doing that. And so after a playtest wraps, you obviously need to like aggregate, interpret, organize all of this data so that it is actionable. You've captured the data, right? But until now, the problem has been, am I confident that my playtest group represents my target audience, which is the problem that we're solving. And so, could you expand a little bit more into the technical details of how this new tool works?
For sure, yeah. The typing tool is super valuable. If you conduct the research with the wrong person, then your data is completely wrong, right? So in the past, all we've really had is demographics to go off of for the most part. So it's like, at Big Fish, our target was 45-year-old women tended to be the ones that played this type of game that we're building. So we would recruit off of that. And that was some of the best information we had. What games are they playing? How often are they playing? And then who they are, demographically. Versus coming into Solsten, now we're looking at things at a personality level. So we're getting beyond that demographics. The typing tool allows either us, if we're conducting the research, or you as a game developer to be able to find those folks that are fit that personality in a way that is precise so that you know that you've got the right person in there. If I go back to demographics, I could recruit 45-year-old women, but not every 45-year-old woman is the same, right? Versus if you think at a personality level, we've gotten rid of that. And we're saying, we know that this is the personality of the person that plays this. And if I use my typing tool then to ask a series of questions to the participant, and with those questions align with that persona, then they get put into that bucket and I can invite them into the playtest. So the precision with which you get now out of this typing tool with the personality is beyond anything beyond the demographics or any other way that you recruit. So with that, you build confidence in, I have the right person in this research. I can be more confident at saying that this small, even if it's a small sample size, is representative of the larger population because we have them at this psychographic level that we didn't have before. So the typing tool is just essentially a series of questions that is asked to you. So you add that onto your screener criteria. You can still use all the demographics in the game, but you ask them this series of questions. And then in the back end, we look at it and say, okay, this person types into persona 1 or persona 2, whatever it is in the side of that bucket. And then you say, I want X amount of people out of each one of those personas, and then you recruit from that. So there's not there's a small little extra step that you go through, but it's all done in the same screening process. So you get that precision, and then you have much more confidence in the data ultimately when you've done that research.
Yeah, and so in the last note, you were mentioning potentially doing more with less, which I feel like is something that is going to hit home with a lot of different studios, regardless of size. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the way we do resonance studies oftentimes is that we can do, or even a play test, we can be confident in a set of, say, 7 to 10 people within a persona because of the precision of that recruiting. So instead of having to do quantitative sample sizes, even in a play test where you need to get 30 or 50 people to feel confident in that data, you can really keep that down to a small 7 or 8 people because you know that you've got the exact psychologically profiled person in that play test. And so they are then, we have the data to show that it can be extrapolated out to the entire population with that because of that profiling that we've done, because we know what the addressable market is. We know that many people out there have this psychological profile. They are going to behave this way, and we're more confident that their behavior will match that because of that psychological profiling. People behave the way they do because of their psychological profile. Environment impacts that, but ultimately psychology is what drives our typical behavior. So with that, we have that confidence in that smaller sample size instead of having to run large sample sizes overall. So you're going to save costs up front in doing that research as well as then saving all the dev costs and stuff from the research. So you get compounding benefits with that overall.
That's amazing. Yeah, let's end on that note. If you'd like to learn more about Solstice typing tool and use it for your next playtest or resonance test, reach out to Scott at solsten.io. Thanks for joining today.